Okay, I think I'm live. So, in offhand chance that there's someone who's right there right away, hello, my name is Brian Kwong. I'm a Salesforce MVP, and I've basically been messing around with Flow and everything since the very day it came out. I'm very excited because we're going to be playing with Flow Orchestrator, which went generally available in the Spring 22 release. I've been building a couple of these for some customers of mine. I work as a consultant at Better Partners, and I find some foibles, and I haven't found a lot of things where it is really well documented in an easy manner. So what I want to do today is kind of like talk about a use case for Orchestrator, or something really simple, and walk through what the thought process is that I have to build one and some considerations, and then we'll just go ahead and well build one. So let me go switch over here and we'll take a look at Salesforce. So one of the first things is I'll show you where you can find how to start into Flow Orchestrator. You're going to go down to Flows, start a new one, and this is where it starts to deviate from how you would create a flow normally. You actually need to click on this All Plus Templates option, and you'll see one of the options for a template is an orchestrator, and you get two types. You can have one where it gets auto launched, like as it says Apex REST API and so forth, or record trigger orchestration. Now, if this is where you start for your orchestrator, you're starting on the wrong spot. And the reason for that is Orchestrator is more like a meta flow. It is a place that is like a flow, but it contains other flows. It really depends on other flows already being built. So if you're thinking through your process and you think this is where you're going to start, you're going to have a very difficult time because you're not going to be able to set anything up without those other flows being created already. So when I am thinking through a process that I think Orchestrator is going to use, I actually start by just doing some really high level mapping of what I think the process is and what the various stages and steps could be and so forth. I like to use Elements Cloud's process for this. You could use Visio. You can use Post-it notes. It really doesn't matter as long as you do something. And so in our use case, it's going to be kind of an approval process use case where we have a case that comes in. Depending on some case information, we may have it go to two different places. So we'll have an approval for quality, and then if its case type is magical, it goes to a wizard's approval, and if it's not magical, it goes to engineering approval. So that's kind of what the orchestrator would look like. But each of these boxes here that have the word approval in it needs to have, well, an approval. And we're not going to use approval processes, although for this real simple use case we could. But what it means is we need to actually have a flow to act as a approval to be used in these steps. So that means that's the first thing we need to build. We're going to start with a simple idea, and then we're going to make this a little bit more complicated, where I'll show you what I've done for kind of like a dynamic user type assignment, where the users are more, let's say, dynamically controlled or more flexible than departments or groups or whatever the case may be. And if we get time for that, we'll go over and we'll start that. But I do want to focus on the main part of it to give you an idea, and then we'll go through. So we know the first thing that we need to do is we need to build our approval for the flow itself. So let's go back. Let's go create a new flow. And Flow Orchestrator can handle two different types of flows. It can handle an auto launch flow for things that you may want to happen behind the scenes automatically. But any place where you're assigning work to a user, those are going to be Screenflows. So we're going to go ahead and create a Screenflow. And now we have to think of, well, what do we want to have happen? Well, in an approval, there's usually some information, maybe a place for comments, and potentially a place for people to go in and say, approve or not approved. So let's start with the screen first. So we'll go ahead and grab our screen, and let's put some display text out there. Say this directions message. All right, now we need to have a place to have them say yes or no to approve. So we're going to use radio buttons for this. And we'll make these choices. We'll add the one for no. And I just realized I actually want to make something different here. Because what I can do is I can make it say no, but then I can actually have the value be true or false instead, which I think is actually a little bit easier. So, did it not save my no? It did not save my no. Let's try that again. Oh, according to this, it is there. So, why didn't it show up? All right, we'll figure that out in a second. Where do I have it? I didn't name it. And let's get rid of the header. And I am a big believer in not having the previous buttons or the pause button showing up for a lot of these. Okay, so why do I have... do I have this listed? I do have this listed as text. All right. This is why planning is always good, because I clearly did not plan this well. All right, so let me go delete the no and recreate that as a Boolean the way I wanted it to be. And we'll go back and add the radio buttons. And this is supposed to be set to Boolean. That's why it didn't show up. Okay. And so, for a really simple approval process, that's probably all you really need is to have that there. And then we're going to go and decide what else we would need on here. So we're going to be using cases. So one of the things I could do is I can go and maybe put fields directly on the record based on the case. So we need to have a new variable, which is going to be a record, and it's going to be a case, and we're going to make it available for input. And now we'll get our wonderful fields, and let's just put some, we'll get the subject up here, get the description, maybe case number, case type. Let's do that. All right. So there's the basic things. One of the things we need to be able to do is then say output whether or not it was approved. And there's probably better ways to do this. The one way that I've had good success with is creating a variable that it matches the yes or no, and I set the default value to be the value of the screen component. And the reason I've been doing that is I haven't quite figured out a better way to grab something that was on the screen without passing it to a variable or something like that, because it needs to be marked as an output. So that's really all we need to do is that for really simple flow. We can have this have decisions. We can have it do all the different things, but we're gonna make it really simple right now, and we're gonna call this an Orchestrator approval flow. Save it. Activate it. All right. Now on to the orchestrator itself. So we're going to go back to new flow, go to templates, go to orchestrator. We're going to make this a record triggered orchestration. And it looks very much like a record triggered flow. As a matter of fact, it's set up at the very top, just like a record triggered flow. So we're going to say it's going to be fired on cases. And in our circumstance, I created a new field that says if it requires approval. And so we only want it to fire the first time. And we need to... This is one thing that always gets me with Orchestrator. There's no done button here. So I keep clicking the save when I don't need to click the save. I can just close this down and it keeps the values. It's a little different. Now, I did say this is kind of like a meta flow, but you'll notice we don't have all the same elements that we can use. We really only have stage and decisions at this level. So a stage is essentially a collection of different steps, and a step is a specifically assigned flow. So we're going to go and just call this phase 1 for right now. And start of the orchestration for the initial approval. Okay. And then we have to say, well, when is this stage considered complete? And it's either when all the steps inside it are complete or when a specific evaluation returns true. I haven't played around with the second one too often. Most of the times it's when all the steps have been complete for me. So again, there's no new here, so I just close this out. And now I have steps. So as I said before, where a stage is essentially a collection of steps, and the steps are specific flows. When you click add step, we now have two choices. We have a background and we have an interactive. Background is going to be things like auto launch flows, things that you want to run within a stage of the orchestrator, but you're not going to assign that for someone to do some work. And this particular situation, we don't need a background step, but we do need the interactive step. And so the interactive step is the what we assign to a end user. My goodness. There we go. And for every step, we have to say, when do we want the stage or this step to start? And there's a bunch of options. One is when the stage itself starts. The other is when a different step within that stage is marked as complete. And the last one is when a different flow is returned true. In this circumstance, we're going to use when the stage starts because it's the only step that's going to be in this particular orchestrator. If I had something that I want to run as automatic beforehand, kind of like maybe setting up the particular orchestrator, I may mark this to say I'm going to have this start after a step is done and have that be the auto launch step, the non-interactive step, the background. But for right now, we're just going to use stage, and then because we need to select the flow, we select the flow, and now we can see we have our inputs. So we're going to actually input the record, which is the case. That's all I need to do. And now we have the record ID. The record ID is the ID that the step should show on. So when the user is going to go complete this orchestration step, where do they go? And right now it has to be a record ID. I would really like it if it was something like the home page or something generic, but it has to be a record ID. But it doesn't have to be the record ID that launched the orchestration. So if we wanted to, we could make this show up on the account page or any other record in the system, as long as we have a way to access the ID of that record within the orchestration to reference it. Let me try that again. For simplicity's sakes, we're just going to use the ID of the case that started it. All right, on to specified assigned user. Specified assigned user is basically who is going to be doing the work. And we have a bunch of different options. The first one is just a user, and that's really simple. It's you go in and you type in, hey, I want to go put this specific user every single time this stage launches. It's always this user. You could select that. Other options in here is group and queue. So we could use a group. I'm trying to remember what I did for all my groups here. I think we did engineering for a group. We did engineering for a group. So group can it's a public group is what this reference is for. So you can have multiple people in that public group, and I could go assign this to be everyone in engineering. We can also use a queue. So, for example, customer support or quality or whatever the case may be, which is the difference is being accused could be also the owner of a record. But for this particular situation, if I remember, we go back to here, the first step is quality. So if I'm going to be doing this, it's going to always be going to the queue for quality. And then we have when the assigned user has completed the Screenflow, this step is marked completed. Or when the specified evaluation flow returns true, this step is completed. In our circumstance, it's one flow. It does it. It's done. It's over. So we'll close this out. All right. So now we have a bifurcation where we need to send it to someplace else depending upon the case type. So we need to have a decision added here. And this is going to be the wizards as the one item. And our basis for that is on the record type equals magical. And then everything else goes someplace else. So the decision path here, we can have multiple different paths, just like a regular flow is multiple outcomes. But this is where we can pass to different stages. And this can be really useful in the circumstance where you may have a really complicated approval process or any other type of work process where it's being passed around to lots of different groups of people depending upon something like the criteria of the case or even some input that came in from one of the previous approvals. But this, we're going to be using case type just because it's really simple. So I new stage. Be consistent. Get rid of all those spaces. Okay, and we're going to have, when everything's completed, we're going to do the same thing for the other side. So there's our two stages. Now we need to add our steps. So these will be the interaction steps. We'll keep it that way. We're going to start it when the stage starts. We go back to our same flow. And then we specify the record again, which is going to be the case. And for this one, I believe I used... I should have remember what should I use. Well, I'm always going to be the person who's doing this, so it's going to be Brian. Okay, so that particular one is set up. And we'll do the one for everyone else. Same flow. Same. Well, I didn't pass in the case in the other one. We should do that. Go here, and this has got to be the ID of the case. And for all others, that's engineering. That is a public group. And what I'm thinking about, let's come back here and add the input for our approval flow. Now, if we ran this as it is, the way this is set up at this point is phase 1 is triggered, the quality does its approval. When this person finishes by clicking finish or next on that flow, this step is done. And since it's the only step within the stage, it moves on to the decision. And then the decision looks at the record type and says, hey, this needs to go to either the wizard or to everyone else based on that case type. Now, there's one thing here that we didn't talk about and considered is, what if quality's rejected? What if they said, no, I'm not going to approve this? There's nothing in this flow right now that basically says if quality rejects it, do this. So right now, regardless if quality rejects it or approves it, it's going to go down to the decision and either go to wizard or go to engineering. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want to bother the wizards and the engineers just because quality rejects it. So we're going to go to our decision, and we need to add a different outcome, as well as update this one. So the first thing is we're going to say that this is rejected. And the way we do this is, you'll notice we have stages and we have steps. So each one of these has things that we can do. So here's our quality approval step. So I'm going to click into that. And now we have a status and output. Status is the step completed or not. Outputs would be anything that you have a variable or a resource inside of that flow that is marked for output. So that's why we have that approved status. We mark that there. And this, we only want it to go if it's been accepted. So that's quality approval, outputs, approval status equals true. Okay, so now we have items, and you know what? It'll make more sense to put that at the top from an evaluation standpoint. Okay. So now we have rejected, and we can just have it end. We don't have to put something there. We could have a completely different stage if we wanted to, or whatever the case may be. So there's our basic orchestrator. Let's go save this. And then what we'll do is we'll activate it. Great. All right, so now we have an orchestration, and that's take us 20-some minutes for a really simple one. So to be able to get people to do the work, though, we need to go and put a couple things on the record page. So we're going to go and start on the case here, and we're going to edit the lightning page for the case. And on here is a new lightning component. And we'll find it on the left-hand side. It's called Orchestrator Work Guide. And we'll just dump that right up the top. Well, let's try that again. Dump that at the top. And there's not too much that we have for the components. We can add visibility onto this. Which would probably make a good sense since we have a field here for approval requires, and it is only ever going to have something for someone to be assigned if this is marked as requiring approval. So let's go save this page. Make sure it's activated properly for the org default. It is. And go back to our case. All right, so here's our case, and right now there's nothing at the work here because I don't have anything here for requires approval. Now the downside is this is a dev org, and with dev orgs I can have a max of 2 regular Salesforce license users, so I don't have tons of people to use in this, which means I'm one, and then I have a generic user that also is, well, it's also me because it's my dev org. So we're going to go ahead and click yes, click save. By doing this, that's triggered our orchestrator. And the orchestrator has then assigned me some work. And I can see that the orchestration is called the Orchestrator Flow. It's currently in stage phase 1 with the step of quality approval. Now here's the thing. If another user comes and looks at this case, they have not been assigned any steps. So the work guide won't show anything here. It's only going to show to the user who's been assigned to do steps. So we got it. We're good to go. I'm going to update the description here, but that wouldn't make any sense because I don't have an option to update the case anywhere within the flow. So we're just going to make this yes or no. We'll click yes, click finished. It's been assigned. That's great. Wonderful. So now it's gone on to the next step. Now, there's a few other things that are pretty neat about orchestrators. If we go into the runs, there is orchestrator runs and there's orchestration work items. So if we look at the runs, we can see how many orchestrations are currently running. We can see there's only one, the one that we literally just did. Right here, it's in progress. Who it started by, when it was last touched, and we can look into it. It's really not all that fanciful right here, but the related one shows you the specifics of where you are within this particular orchestration. So we can see phase 1 is completed. It's currently waiting on wizard approval as the stage. You can see the all the wonderful little steps in the history here. The other orchestration list view that we have, or tab, is the work items. And this is going to show all the different work items that are assigned out. So in this particular situation, I can see that we have quality and then we have it assigned to me. So even though it's technically assigning it both to me because I'm in the quality queue as well as directly being assigned, you can see that we have 2 different steps that have been assigned to me. One of them is completed because that's the one we just did. And you can see the context record, which is always going to be the record that you specified in the interactive step. So you remember where we talked about that is the step of the ID where the orchestration will be showing up if it's assigned to people. That's the context record. So if I go click on this, it's refreshing the context record. It's and because it's assigned it to me, I get the approval again, once again, finished, and there are no more assignments. We're done. We're good to go. So that orchestration is done, and we can confirm that by going back to our tab, taking a look at all those work items, and we can see that everything's completed. So really simple. It's not exactly the most awe-inspiring example, but let's say that you have a situation where you don't know who the users are going to be that need to be assigned without knowing something else about that case. Because like in our circumstance, we used a public group. So if you have multiple people that could get the assignment, you can use a public group. You could use a queue. If you always know it's going to be the specific same person, you can always just assign that user. But if you have, you don't know, like you really only have a couple of choices. One is you can go into the orchestrator, you can have a decision, and let's say it's based off a case type. You can have a decision here that says, here's the flow if it's going to be the engineering, and here it is if it's quality, here it is if it's pricing, here it is, and so forth. That's perfectly fine, except for you're going to be replicating our phased approvals here in every single group, which probably isn't. So what we really want is to keep our setup here, but have the people and groups that get assigned to be different. And the way I came up with this is I created a piece of custom metadata. that I just call Orchestrator Assignment. And these assignments are pretty straightforward. Let's go add our field here. It's really nothing more than having the name of all the information that is needed to determine. So we have department and we have type, so as in case type. So in this circumstance, it's either going to be magical or other. And what we can do is for each one of these, I have the API or developer name, depending on the circumstance. If you are going to be using a user, it's got to be the username. It's not the ID. It's not anything. It's not the user record. It's literally the user name. If you're using a group or a queue, it is the queue or group name. Let's see if I got a good example here. So like here's a completely different user. But if we're going to use the group name, what you would want to do is use, as we wait for everything to load, you're going to use the group name versus the label in this circumstance. If you're doing a query, I'm pretty sure that comes over as developer name. But in our circumstance, I just have this set to all the users, which means now that I can run this, I can update the flow and basically say, I'm going to return users based on the department. So to do that, I'm going to create another flow, and that flow is going to be an auto launch flow that gets called by the orchestrator as a background step. So first things first, I need to go through and have a get to get all my assignments, and Orchestrator Assignment, and we are going to get only the ones for the particular case type. Equals, oh, I have to create the resource for the case. Make sure it's marked as input. There we go. And this is going to be the case type. And we're going to get all the records and all the fields. So now we have all the records and all the fields. What we can do is go through and loop through the items and essentially assign them to variables that we need. Which is, there's a couple different other ways that we could do this. With something this small where you only have a handful of results, you could do multiple gets and get exactly the one record that you want. I'm just choosing it this way for fun. Loop assign. Hence, and it's the collection from our temp there. And then we're going to have a decision. Type. And this is by department. And if I go back to my customer data, we have magical pricing, quality, and engineering. We're going to do the first three here. Go back to right. So this is magical pricing, quality. Okay. So then this comes from, if this is department equals magical. This is if the department is pricing. This is if the department is quality. I know, it's a little on the messy side, but now we're going to go and do a bunch of assignments. So first one is we're going to create a new resource, and this is going to be the magical username. And it's going to be text, available for output. And this is going to equal to the current item and the API developer name. Now, the only thing that's going to be changing on this is basically what assignment that we're going to do. So I'm going to be a little lazy, and I'm going to just paste this in the various places and create a new resource. Which one's this? This is for pricing. So same variable, pricing username, text, available for output, equals that person. Great. Here we do quality, variable, quality username, text for output. Perfect. And we'll save. And we'll activate. And we'll close it on a few tabs. All right, so we're now going to go create a new version of our orchestrator that we did. And in this circumstance, we're going to make this a little bit more dynamic. So we're going to add a step. This is going to be our background step. We're going to get the assignments. We're going to use our Orchestrator Flow. We need to pass in the case, which is the record that's been triggered. And there we go. And we actually want to swap this out. So I'm going to delete the quality approval, and we're going to start that over again. Let's see here. I wish I could move this. I don't think I could move this. It'd be nice to move within the steps. I don't think I can. So we'll just have to do a bunch of deletions. All right, now let's go add an interactive step. Quality. Now, we don't want this step to start at the same time as the stage, because right now has two steps in here. We want this to make sure that this is done when our get assignment step is completed. And now we do our approval flow, pass in the case. We specify the case ID. And instead of assignee type, we're going to use user resource. So any place you see user resource, group resource, or queue resource, it's looking for text of the developer name, API name, or the username. So we know our quality username is coming from our step of get assignments. So we go into the get assignment steps, we go to outputs, and we can see the outputted items for quality. We get quality username. And then we can rebuild the rest of this flow doing the exact same thing. And this way, we don't have to hard set who the users are that need to be approval. We can go grab them from another flow, which in turn grabs them from our custom metadata. So if our approvers are changing, we don't have to change the orchestration. We just need to go change the metadata. Now, one thing that I thought of is since it can be, there could be delays from the moment that one stage is created than the other. You may actually want to call this to get the assigners more than once. So let's say that you have a situation where it could take a week between stage 1 and stage 2. Well, in that period of time, the people who need to be assigned to engineering or to magical could have changed. And you want to accommodate that. So I will actually call the assignment flow again at the start of this stage. Get down to the record. And this is my steps. And this is I'm going to abbreviate this because I can't. There we go. So when I add the interactive step for approval, let's do magic. And we say that this is done when our background step is done. And we do username once again, and we set this to be from our org assignment step 2, outputs, magical, and we're set. So by doing this, we ensure that we're always getting the most recent people who need to be assigned the particular orchestrator step as soon as possible. I'm going to call just save this for work. But that's basically it. Orchestrator isn't all that complicated. It is pretty simple. You can build some complicated things with it. But the biggest thing is you got to plan for it. You really do want to take a step back and think, well, what do I need to do? Who are the people involved? What are the things I need to get? And spend the time up front so you can have everything kind of already built before you get to the orchestrator step. Because if I had to be jumping back and forth between all the flows, it would take a lot more time. Same thing goes if, as you saw, if I was like, I screwed up my steps. I really had my steps backwards. I needed to do the background first, then quality approval. You end up redoing a lot of work, and that just wastes your time. Now, why would you do something like this than regular approval processes? It's a good question. For one, if you are going to be doing a pretty straightforward approval process, I wouldn't use Orchestrator unless you needed to for other reasons. The Orchestrator strengths are that we could do a lot more easier dynamic approver assignment. That's more challenging to do. There are ways to do it with other automation and fields on the record and things like that. The other reason that you might want to do this is it doesn't lock the record. So with other things that are involving approvals, it locks the record, and that may not be something you want depending upon what your business or use case is. What I really like about this is it's a nice way to kind of stretch a process that is being passed back and forth a lot. There's some other benefits to this as well. One of them is that we don't have to go and write to the case every single time that we do something. For example, if I wanted to give people the ability to capture something within the orchestration step, I don't have to put it in the case. What I could do is I could keep that as a variable within the step, so it stored the data within the orchestration, and then at the end I could have a step that essentially is a background step that grabs the various things from the other steps in the orchestrator and say, okay, go take the value from this flow and the value from this flow and go save it to these fields on the case at the very end. Kind of like for a history standpoint. That could be really powerful where you don't want to have to save all the data that you necessarily are using within your flows on the record. You can store it, and then you can manipulate it and then update the record if you needed to at the very end or someplace in the middle. The other thing is you can leap these and stitch things together, which can get really complicated, and that's why we're not doing it on this particular stream. Um, Flow Orchestrator, as of right now, it's March 3rd. If you're on Enterprise or above, I think you get 600 orchestrations, so that's a run. So every single time an orchestrator starts, that's an orchestration. So in my use case, it would be, do I have 600 cases that need to be approved every year? And if the answer is no, it's less than that, Orchestrator is there, you can use it. You're not going to have problems. If it's going to be more than 600, you're above your entitlement usage, which you can find on your company page in Salesforce, and you're going to want to talk to your AE before you make any plans. I've heard things as much as $1 in orchestration, but I have absolutely no idea on, like, are they going to make you pay for it a lot? So we're in a dev arg, so we don't see anything. But if you go down to usage-based entitlements, or you will see a reference for orchestration, and that will give you an idea what your limits are. Another reason why you may want to consider Orchestrator, the other reason why you may want to consider approval processes over an orchestrator is right now there is no related list for the steps outside of that tab. So like if I wanted to have a place on my case that says here are where we are within the orchestrations, what stage and who are we waiting on. Right now I would have to build it myself because all that information is stored on the orchestration and not accessible on the case. Supposedly that's something that will be coming up, but who knows when. And so if that's something where it's really important to be able to see where you are within a larger approval process, unless they're going to build that tracking and putting that on a custom object for yourself, you may be better off using regular approval processes. That's what I got so far. Like I said, approval processes or orchestrations are not horribly complicated to build. It's the planning that you need to do. I'm going to be playing around with this a lot more probably in the coming months. And if I think of any other really cool use cases for this or interesting tidbits, I'll definitely do another one of these or do a blog post to kind of go through it. The places that got me tripped up on here are the things like there is no like complete field here. You have to click on the X. And I'm so used to that losing anything you put in there that always throws me for a curve. The other thing that's thrown me for a loop is the fact that user resource is expecting a username. Group resource is expecting the group developer name. Queue is expecting the queue name and not IDs. I wasted a lot of time trying to figure that out. The other thing that I found kind of tripping me up is getting that approval, that status out of that approval stage. That's why we created that variable to store what the user selected on the screen. Because there is a way to be able to go through and say, provide a value on the step. But right now I'm pretty sure that's literally just, is it done or is it not done? I don't think there's anything else in there that we could really use. So hopefully you find this useful. If you got really cool user experience, user use cases, or you got questions, feel free to post them in the comments below if you're watching this after the stream. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting and useful.